schools, about reopening. Of course, we tied it in, of course, across the country, but especially in our own backyard. Larry has pointed out, especially in Newark, New Jersey, where Mayor Ras Baraka came out early before schools was before the students were supposed to report to school. It basically said, "Hey, we're going virtual because we're not ready to open the schools." But here in New York City, it was just a back and forth, and it's still back and forth. But I want to introduce our guest and bring him in, and that is Dr. Shango Blake. He is the president of Black Edfluencers United. Good evening, Dr. Blake. How are you, my brother?
Good evening. I mean, under these current circumstances, I can't be too well because we're all dealing with this great injustice to our community and gross injustice to the family of Breonna Taylor. So, you know, I come onto this program with my heart heavy with that news that was dropped today.
This is I've learned from before I met this brother. I met his father doing the Million Man March. His father was responsible for Queens. I remember he was working with the great Bob Law, dealing with getting folks together for that big Million Man March. And then I got a chance to meet Dr. Shango Blake, who at that time was a student, and he went on to do great things as a principal here in New York City, especially in the borough of Queens. Matter of fact, my cousin went to his school and really thrived in his school. And as you know, that some of our past guests, Sister Courtney and David Banks, and are all members, and Sister Zakia are members of his Black Edfluencers United. And one of the things that we talked about, especially you, Brother Larry Ham, you talking about putting the people in the streets, is we were talking about, and you said this, Larry, where are the parents, especially the Black and the brown parents' voices? And this coming Friday, there's going to be a parent and community rally for our children. And as I just stated, Black and brown parents' voice has not been included in the reopening of the New York City Department of Education schools. Our children's health and safety is more important than politics. So this coming Friday, September 25th at 5:30 p.m. on the steps of Tweed Building, 52 Chambers Street in New York City, there is going to be a rally for the parents, Black and brown and all the parents, to come out so you can hear their voices. We've been talking about this, and I wanted to bring on the president of Black Edfluencers because I said it's that time that we need to hear from your organization, Dr. Shango Blake, and also the voices of the parents out there, especially of our Black and brown kids, because we're mostly affected by the COVID-19 coronavirus that is affected, and there's an uptick in New York City. Dr. Shango Blake, talk about why you are doing this and why you're doing it now.
Well, first, we'd like to thank Borough President Eric Adams for making the call to action and reaching out to us and our network of educators and parents. The reason why we're doing this is very simple. It's just as you said, our voices have not been heard. And COVID-19 has not created, but it has exposed and compounded something that has always existed within our system. We're dealing with a system that is rooted in institutional racism and systemic oppression that literally suppresses the Black voice, the Black and Latin voice, the Black and brown voice in this city. In a city where you have right now about 64% of the total student population is Black and brown, yet we have no seat at the table. We're not engaged as partners, real partners in the direction and the development of what happens with our children. This is historic. This goes back to the Bloomberg era and beyond. This goes back to when they got rid of community controls of schools. And so I'm not talking about some kind of perfunctory CDEC model where we give advice and we give talk and they can choose to listen or not listen, but we're not engaged in real partnership and shared decision making. and de Blasio administration has carried on with that. I don't think that they think that we're even a thought in their mind in terms of that we need to be engaged. I think it's the concept, the traditional concept of parent involvement. And parent involvement means that we have an agenda, we involve you in our agenda and tell you to jump on and support it. Parent partnership means we sit down together and we come up with a joint agenda on behalf of our children. This is not happening. And so we are working to raise Black and brown parents' voices in New York City to bring it back, because there was a time where it was vibrant. We want to bring it back. We want to let people know that we're here to be heard, and we're going to hold you accountable for ignoring us.
I want to start with you, Brother Jamie. You work with Eagle Academy. You're involved in education, but we all hear about the righteousness and the betterment of for our children and our faculty, especially now with the COVID-19 out here. I'll bring you into the conversation first there, Brother Jamie.
So Dr. Blake, just from a historical perspective, and you mentioned, just the community aspect of it, historically, when did that begin to shift where the power was ultimately moved away from the parents and the parents abdicated that power?
Oh, this happened in New York City under the move for mayoral control.
Yes.
And they got rid of community school boards, got rid of the 32 community school districts, and replaced them with what was called regional support centers and regional superintendents. And so it couldn't have happened without the support of state assemblies, state senators, things of that nature. And it actually came out of a push by Mayor Bloomberg at the time, and for him to advocate for Albany to change that structure. And since that time, we've been dealing with community district education councils. The parents have had no say. I mean, if you look at the current situation right now, you have on one end, the New York City Department of Education, and they're fighting to open up schools, reopen up schools, and then open up schools again. On the other side of the equation, you have the United Federation of Teachers, who are saying we need to keep the schools closed, and they're putting their piece in. But absent in this whole conversation is what has been the parents' experience. What has been the parents' experience during the time that they closed the school? When the mayor created a mayoral task force, why didn't he bring parents? Why didn't he bring educators like Courtney Johnson, Kojo Campbell, who's also was on this program? Why didn't he bring those frontline workers to the table who represent our students, who understand, and this is why we started Black Influencers United, who understand that our children's social and emotional experience, their social and economic condition, who understand them culturally, who grew up in the same communities as us. I'm tired of these, what I call limousine liberals that come through our community, right, and tell us what's good for us, and no one engages us who are from the same experiences of our students to say, what is the Black perspective? What is the brown perspective around urban education, about what our children need? No one engages us. So that's why we started an organization to say, we're not going to wait for people to engage us. We're going to assert ourselves in the public domain. And this event on Friday is our first step in terms of activation. But we have been around working quietly for the last 3 years, setting up what Brother Ham had talked about in terms of, and we have a 7-point actionable item agenda. We have, our vision is to serve Black educators, influence others, impact Black children. We have 4 committees: a policy committee, an advocacy committee, a culture and community committee, and a capacity committee. So we've been working, building our structure so that when we respond to things, we're not responding in a reactive way. We're being proactive, and we're getting people to respond to us. So UFT, you have to make room for the Black voice.
Yep.
And so is the DOE.
Yeah, and let me just say this, brother, and it makes me smile because I know this brother, and we if I get a chance, I'll talk a little bit more about it. But one of the things is, and the late Bob Slade's not here, but this is where me and him, we did bump heads on this, because I was trying to explain to Bob that at the particular time, the first shot that was done by the Department of Education when they first came out with this uniform thing, that was the first shot. That was the okey doke right there. They were not putting utensils and the books in our communities, but they came out with this uniform to take the focus off of that. Then they came out doing, as you just said, that they started really towards the end of the Giuliani administration, but hit full force with the Bloomberg administration with that charter school situation. And with that charter school thing, and then not only about charter schools, they started taking up space in public school buildings. You understand? And then funding went. And then what brother said about the voices, I was there. I was on the PTA and school leadership team when we lost those, as those you said, those school districts, those boards, and it went to the regional thing. We lost our voices. We didn't have a voice. We might have had one vote, but that vote didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything. They put the okey doke in, but now they got something. They were sleeping. Like you said, Larry, they were sleeping because there was an organization out here that was preparing, and they just not coming out just emotionally. They are coming out prepared. Bobby Child,
let me just quickly add, and although public schools have long had public-private partnerships, keep in mind, this is very important. The charter school movement was heavily funded by corporate money, Wall Street money. And so that in part was to try to break the union. So I don't want to get too deep in that, Brother Shango, right. You know, he has a lot to say, but people have to keep that in mind. The charter school movement was significantly funded and continues to, we see Betsy DeVos, by corporate interests.
Exactly, and I don't want to get into it, but I saw through that when we start to bring those folks on, and I start to see through them that they started to spend money in advertising, but they had a hidden agenda. And when we bust them on the air, well, I bust them on the air about that nonsense. They looked at me like, because they the okey doke was in. But that's another conversation. Bobby.
Listen, Dr. Blake, thank you for joining us this evening and for being a voice and a building force to bring about change.
Yes.
You talked about, you know, the okey doke and the assemblymen. Could you talk a little bit more, since, you know, we're in an election year, and I think there's more people who are more in tune to the power of their vote and down tickets, particularly local elections. Can you talk about some of the things that they should be looking for moving forward to get the right type of candidates and policies and programs in place through their vote?
Well, I think that what they need to first do is look within. We spent a long time building an agenda so that when we go to elected officials and they ask us for our vote, or they're running for different seats, we have an agenda to present to them to say that, are you going to speak to the agenda? I think a lot of times we say vote, but we leave it on the surface in a symbolic place. We don't understand what happens before the vote, what should happen after the vote, how voter education is critical. I was having a conversation with a group of young people, just trying to ascertain, do you understand what this office does? What is their responsibility to you? And what I found, and many of them didn't, but I found out that a lot of us as adults don't know either. If you ask the average person, well, what does an assemblyman do? What does a city council person do? So with that lack of knowledge, how can you really vote? You know, and if we're putting people into the, you know, the schools are producing students, and they've not been taught as a result of going through a 12 years of education how to be critical thinkers, then anybody can win our vote with a nice Fifth Avenue ad and a great superficial speech, and it doesn't move anything forward. So I think that we have to really look at like everything. And I heard you talk about the electoral politics and the electoral college.
Yes.
And I'm really glad that you're going to touch on that subject, because we need to be able to unpack those things, right? So that we understand what's going on, because I think that there is an argument to be made that there's plantation politics in the Democratic Party. But if you say that, what does that mean to people if they don't even understand the process upon how voting even takes place and what it does? There is the Republicans who, like Malcolm said, the Democrats, the Fox, the the Republicans the wolf, but they're both canines, right? So we have to be able to think critically about what's happening. But what I will say is that voting does have consequences. I would just say that before we can, I think we have to get to a place and a space, and I hope I'm doing your question justice, brother. But it's really something that we don't have an agenda and a demand. So for BU, we're single issue voters. We want to know what you're going to do in the educational space for Black children. We want to know what you're going to do in the educational space for Black educators. And if you can come to us and say that this is the work that you're going to do, then you're going to have our support if you support our agenda. We don't need a saxophone. We don't need you to come into the church and give the great sermon and show us how down you are. We don't need your pocketbook and hot sauce. We need you to speak to our agenda, but that is not the politicians' fault. It's our fault because we haven't taken time to craft and develop an agenda to weigh candidates when they run.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And you answered it better than I can ever hope. And I'm not surprised at that. And you also reinforce something that has left the school systems, which is just basic civics. So teaching civics. I was fortunate enough to be of a generation where I learned some civics, didn't quite understood it, but it gave me enough to play catch up when today's youngsters are unfortunately learning about civics based upon the inequities that they're seeing, which it's too late for them to make some changes.
In actuality, bro, that is one of our actionable item agendas, that civics and social action is a mandate, must be taught K through 12, that we have to teach civics and social action.
And let me just say this, brother is not just talking and sat down. He applied this agenda, and he also did it with a hip hop twag to it, I'd say, you know, exactly. There you go. This brother did it. And you got to see the CD, the tape that the brother put out, what the kid put together, what he had his students do in the whole school. They were operating, all of his students were operating on this level. Sister Pam, let me bring you into the conversation.
His own version of Hamilton.
Brother, yo, he did it before Hamilton. Before Hamilton, baby. Sister Pam.
Well, you know what? I'm glad you're organizing parents to get out and stand up for their children, because children don't have a voice without their parents. I hope that parents become angry enough, you know, at the fact that our kids are not taught at the same pace, that they don't have the same exposure to things. I hope they get as mad as that as the fact that they can't send their kids to school because they don't have a babysitter. Yes. See, I don't have any empathy for any Black mamas or Black fathers or any of the rest of them. That the anger is centered around, I can't send my kids because I don't have anybody to watch them. Schools are torn up in New York. They've been torn up in New York before there was a pandemic. Education is not at a level it should be at. Kids are being penalized for stuff that other people, when you were younger, you would have just got a little slap on your wrist. I want parents to get angry enough that outside of this pandemic, they demand for children to get quality education right where they sit, not a charter school, but in the public schools. I want this question to you is, how many families do you have that's a part of your organizations, mothers and fathers, who are, what does your membership entail? And then number two, in the 40 some days we have left for election, you're not saying to brothers and sisters that if they don't get educated, they shouldn't go to polls and vote, right?
No, I'm just saying that what they should do is that they shouldn't just stay with the vote and then walk away as if they did some kind of duty and not follow up in the next steps. So let me give you an example. Right now, Biden is the better choice in this situation. However, Biden has a responsibility to us. Biden right now is really leaning towards working class white men in his national presentation. So we should still put the fire under Biden to say, hey, you've got to speak to us. And then when he goes in term 1, if he doesn't do what he's supposed to do, he shouldn't have a 8-year period. There should be this, we're gonna give you this chance. But if you don't do what you're supposed to do, then we're going to get you out of there, so that they have a sense of accountability towards us. And I just want to
wait a minute, Brother Blake, before you answer the second question, dude, if I knew rap, I'd rap about you right now. Listen, nobody will pass. The black, the brown, the yellow, the green.
Nobody.
I don't care.
Nobody. You know,
I gotta get the T-shirt.
I'm of the mindset of, you know, permanent friends, no. Permanent enemies, no. Permanent enemies, yes. I want everybody to come on and put a dashiki on and tell me what you're going to do for us. And if you're ready to do that, then we can talk. But as far as the parents and the community, I'm so glad that you asked that question, because people often ask us, and I got to say, I'm really here as a representative of a dynamic group of people. Brother Pateen, we hope that you have more and more, because there's so many people connected with BU.
Yeah.
BU is our nickname, and you know, Black Influencers United, BU, be your own authentically Black self. But our parents and our community, that's why we have the Culture and Community Committee. It's not just building community within, it's reaching the community without. So we're developing strategic partnerships with community-based organizations and PTAs. Everybody always says, well, why y'all call Black Edfluencers? We call Black Edfluencers because we didn't want to say educator, because some people might say, well, that doesn't apply to me, even though we all are educators. We wanted everybody to know that if you want to influence what's happening in the educational space, then this organization is for you. So that includes parents, community, and beyond. Anybody who wants to improve the condition of Black children and the quality of Black children. And I love what you said about educating Black children.
That's right.
Because lost in this whole conversation about health and safety is education. I'm concerned about what is going to be the quality of education moving forward. What are we doing? I know Courtney was on here last week, and she talked about how teachers are being told, just post the work and walk away. So what are we doing here as it relates to, we already have an achievement gap prior to the pandemic. Right. We already had certain students that were in gifted and talented programs and not enough gifted, talented programs in our community. We're already the most segregated school district in the country. New York City Department of Education is a institution that is racist. Now, the chancellor was trying to address those things, right? And got a lot of pushback from local papers, got pushback from union people when he started talking about an equity agenda.
Yeah.
The mayor was running for president and kind of let him out to dry, as far as I'm concerned.
He was sued, Shango. Brother Shango, he was sued for that.
Yeah. So my whole thing is that you see the pushback and the resistance. And Brother Pateen, I love the fact that you always represent what I went through with the DOE. It is clear that I'm a prototype for what you're seeing today, making institutional change, really pushing up on teachers who didn't want to teach and say, you're going to be in this school, you're going to teach our Black children. That's coming against unions that were resisting. There's no difference between the PBA and the UFT. They are obstructionists when it comes to creating better police community relations and creating better community involvement and empowerment within our schools. And anyone who really tries to build a school that's going to teach our children to be captains of industry and entrepreneurs and do the kind of things that will create generational wealth, they will be attacked, because slavery is the first institution that was built on racism. It was an institution that others profited on at the exploitation and brutality of others. This system called America, this business called America, is a system rooted on the oppression of Black and brown at the benefit of white corporations. So you need Black bodies in jail in order for the system to work. And if you come in as a disruptor to that, oh baby, you better be expected to be attacked. I've been on the Post, I've been on the Daily News, and I wear all of that as a badge of honor. I love when you attack me because I know I'm doing the right thing for my children and my community, and I sleep very well at night.
That's
So
right.
my final question is are you Larry's brother or his son?
I'm gonna say I'm his son because I've been watching his brother and saluting him for years. So
there you go.
I study amongst greats.
Dr. Shango Blake, his father and Larry are cut from the same cloth. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. But let me get Sister Nitha in, and then of course I want to bring in Larry. I would save you for last, Larry, on this conversation here. But Nitha and then Brother Larry.
I love it. Dr. Blake, thank you for being out here and doing the work and also using a hip hop edge, as Fatim was trying to say. You know, as a former hip hop head, actually, I still am. I appreciate that a lot. And, you know, we often talk about on this show how COVID and the pandemic has ripped the scab off of disparities that were already existing, right? And one of the greatest places is in educational system. So you see that in the digital divide, you know, students that are trying to learn from home and they're not able to, they either don't have laptops or they don't have internet access. And then added on top of that is the actual health impacts of the pandemic itself. So it's something like 121, I think 121 people under the age of 21 have been killed by the virus so far. And nearly 2/3 of them are Black and Latino. So that, again, once again, so even it's not only adults, even in young people, it's primarily Black and brown kids that are suffering greatly. And so my question is, do you have any specific demands with regards to the pandemic itself that you're putting forth as well too, or concerns by parents that you want and need them to be addressed immediately as well?
Well, what I'm here to do is represent the parents' voice and give them and help them speak up for themselves as to what's been their experience. It's not for me to say what parents. I mean, I am a parent. I have a child who's a senior in New York City schools. But for the other parents, like on Friday, we're talking about this is your opportunity to say what your experience has been, what your loss has been, what your trauma has been, and how these decisions and how these decisions create more anxiety and more trauma. So just to give you the backstory, for the last 30 weeks since the pandemic, my thing hasn't been about advocacy as much as it's been about support. We have a program called the Parent Teacher Check-In. Every Friday, we are online and we're engaging parents around what they're going through. And we allow parents and teachers to come in together. If you want to scream, scream. You want to yell, yell. If you feel like, you just need to release, we want you to have the opportunity to release, and then we bring on guest speakers to give you support. So I've been listening and hearing the information. So when Eric Adams came and said, look, I want to do something about what's happening with Black and brown parents, can you reach out? I said, absolutely, because I know what parents have been expressing in these support groups. So now it's time to take those conversations that have been happening where parents are talking about how they lost family members, lost jobs. They don't know where their next, there's real issues about food and where they're going to eat, and their children don't have anything to do, and the children didn't get the iPad, or these are the kind of conversations that are consistently happening. So it's about taking those parents who have been sharing that and giving them the mic and letting them represent and speak for themselves. And I just want to say, in speaking of that, because I came here to say, I always like to bring resources and guides. There's a group called the Institute of the Black World, 21st century, and I'm sure you know about that. They have a community listening line for essential workers. Our educators and our parents are essential workers. It is specifically culturally relevant. It's for Black people who are going through stress, to talk to people who understand who they are culturally. And I just wanted to give out that number, which is 877-719-117. That's 877-719-1177. It is the community listening line. It is a support piece for parents.
Let me just say that number again, 877-719-1177. Community listening line, right?
Parents can call, get support, talk with counselors and social workers. So my work has been around the support of that, but it's from that work, my sister Anita, that it has prompted me to feel so committed now to raise these questions along with those parents and educators around what's happening with Black and brown parents in the city of New York.
Sounds good. Brother Larry Ham.
I'll defer to Jamie and Bobby since they are New Yorkers, and then I'll come in after Jamie and Bobby.
I got them. I
No,
gave
no,
them.
no,
They
no,
spoke.
no,
They spoke
already.
They spoke.
All
Yeah, I
right.
did them already. Yes.
Well, Dr. Blake, thank you for your work
Yes,
and giving Black and brown parents a voice. My position is that your group and all the other advocate groups that are in existence should be given a place at the table with the Board of Education. They shouldn't have any meetings of stakeholders where your group and other advocate groups are not participating. You know, in Newark, when Mayor Ras Baraka established the Police Review Board, which has now been challenged by the Supreme Court, but when he established it, he didn't establish it with appointees that he just, notable citizens that he would appoint to the board. The people on the Police Review Board in Newark, or the one that Newark is trying to establish, are all representatives of organizations that fight police brutality. They're not just these, notable citizens. They're organizations that have been doing the work fighting police brutality, and each group selects a representative to be on the Civilian Complaint Review Board. My position is that a similar approach should be taken with folks in New York, that your group and any other advocate groups that are doing the righteous work of organizing Black and brown parents should have a seat at the table. When the mayor and the chancellor sit down, y'all should be at the table too. But in addition to that, you need a citywide PTA association. Every school should have a PTA. Every school in New York should have a PTA, and there should be a citywide PTA of the schools. My God, that would be some kind of assembly, right? Because it's got to be at least 1,000 schools in New York. And then there should be an elementary division, a middle school division, and a secondary school division, because the children at those different levels have different needs, different expectations, different learning strategies, etc. So the elementary parents should be able to get together, the middle school parents get together, and the secondary school parents get together, and then they all get together. And there should be some kind of citywide gathering every year of the citywide parents association, because without it, it's really, happenstance, catch as catch can. You pick a parent. We need to have a press conference. Call somebody up here. But if you have that citywide, association, then, you have duly elected representatives. But I also say that your groups and other groups should be in there, because what I've noticed with PTAs, I'm a parent. My kids are all grown now, but I went through school with all of them, all the elementary through secondary and everything. What I noticed generally about PTAs, this is not true for every PTA, but generally the PTA parents, a lot of them tend not to be real activists. They're there. This is something they know they must do to help improve conditions at the school, and that's good. And we need that. That's why we need advocates like you, and others from your group and other groups to really be out there representing for us, because the leadership, we need progressive leadership. We don't want PTA presidents who are just going to be a rubber stamp on whatever the chancellor and the mayor want to do. And in some places, that's what the PTAs are. They rubber stamps on whatever the principal wants to do. We need PTA leadership. We need parents that, yes, are cooperative, but at the same time, they're willing to call out the BS when they see it.
absolutely.
There's 1,300 schools, by the way.
1,300. Can you
1,300.
imagine an assembly of 1,300 PTA presidents?
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
PTA or PA. Some schools don't have the PTA; they have PAs. But the same thing, yeah. No, some are PTAs and some are PAs. I learned that when I was a PTA.
And,
But go ahead, brother Shango.
And schools over here, some of them are PTSA because they include students.
Students,
like a lot of Newark schools are PTSA because they include the students in the stakeholder.
Yeah. Brother Shango, I'm gonna let you respond, and then we're gonna hit this because we're gonna have to wind down on this segment.
Absolutely. I just want to say thank you for that. I was taking notes. I was you got my mind going, but it just reminds me, and Brother Fatim remembers this. When I was principal of the school out in Queens, we had a group of parents called the PEST, right? And it was an acronym. It stood for Parents Empowering Students Today. And they worked with the BTA, but they were really their own group, mostly men who secured a 5-block radius of my school in any direction.
Yes.
Right. And they had walkie-talkies, they had identified uniforms that marked them as pests. They were working with the merchants. They were working with the local precinct. They were making sure no gangs were coming up, no pedophiles were hanging around. It was literally, they would come to, and that's what, and this is the lesson I learned from that. They would come in and check in as if they were going to work every day, and they walked their post with such pride. Mm-hmm. But what it was it took leadership that said, I don't know it all. I need your help. Can you help me? And they came forth. We would argue, get into these big arguments about what we needed to do and how we needed to do it, but we would engage in a conversation and a dialogue. And I would always say that sometimes I would win my point, sometimes I would lose my point, but the students never lost because we were arguing about the best way to serve children. Mm-hmm. And so I think that for the leaders and the educators who might be listening, don't approach your position with arrogance and self-importance. Often principals say, I can't get any parents to come out. Well, have you tried going out? Right? Mm-hmm. Because when you come out of the controlled environment of your school and you're willing to go knock on door, make home visits, go to the laundromat, engage parents where they are, bring information and resources with you, then you're saying that I respect you enough to come to where you exist. I believe that you're important enough that I will show up in your places and spaces. And then when you call them to serve and help you, you'll find that they'll come out and throw in numbers because they realize there's a mutual respect and a mutual partnership. If the powers to be at the DOE and in the mayor's office would listen, they have to chip away that arrogance, that self-importance, ask for help, because we have brain power in our community that could really help you become a more effective leader. And then we could work on this problem together. But when you shut us out, then we got to shut you down.
There you go. And I just want to say this, that brother's modest, but again, some of the things, and again, when we look at the past, we learn from the past. And that's why I said, and earlier I pushed Brother Larry to bring that up because, when I was in the movement, I was part of the security arm, and being part of the security arm, I had to be at class training before the folks showed up for rally time. And then after rally time, we had to not only secure, we had to sometimes class after that. It's just a lot of work that had to be done. And I remember working with Dr. Shango Blake folks that patrolled the schools, because my kids was not in his school, but we're in another school, even though they didn't have his program. And brother's modest, again, he's been on Oprah Winfrey. He's the hip hop prince. He was the hip hop principal, and his program went around, And unfortunately, just like in Joe Clark in the movie East Side High, which Joe Clark did really exist, Brother Shango ran up against the same obstacles that Joe Clark ran up against, had that person there that worked for the other side, and and you always got to watch that, and it's a shame. But you see, the brother got, brushed himself up, picked himself up, and has been working and been doing the work out here. So Professor Shango Blake, I've been proud of you when I met you when you was a teenager, my brother.
What I was going to say is ironic,
yes, sir.
Brother. we are at the 25th anniversary coming up October 16th of the Million Man March.
Wow.
Yes,
So
that's it when we first met.
I had hair.
I still got it, brother.
You got it. Good for
I
you.
still got it, baby.
I didn't have these braids, but I was 25 years old at that time. And now here it is, we're organizing and engaging, and parents still doing the work. But I feel like I didn't learn my leadership principles really in a class. I didn't learn it in a doctoral program. I learned it organizing for the Million Man March. So people always ask me, well, what happened since, what was the results of the Million Man March? And I have a simple response, me.
There you go.
I'm a byproduct of that movement.
That's what we wanted. That's what we wanted. We wanted to build those minds. We wanted to build those folks. And of course, I've seen the brother, the product, and you got to realize I might be at the helm now, but our elders, Bob Slade, Mtume, and attorney Bob Pickett were also impressed with this brother and had him on. I just was the producer at that particular time, you know, but I was just very impressed with the brother. So I gave out the information, you know, and I left out something, and I'm glad you said it because I see it at the top that Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams is calling for this. You want to give out the information since I did it the first time? I'll let you give it out this time, my brother.
It's going to be this Friday, 5:30 in front of the Tweed Courthouse. We're asking people to gather at 5 o'clock. The call to action is from Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, and it is a rally to uplift the voices of Black and brown parents around education in the city of New York. And we asking people to come out and join us, raise your voices. This is your forum. This is your opportunity to speak.
Yep. And again, let me just give out add a little bit more to it. And again, this is a call. Parents and community rally for our children. Black and brown parents' voice has not been included in the reopening of the New York City Department of Education schools. Our children's health and safety is more important than politics. So as brother Dr. Shango Blake has just mentioned, this Friday, September 25th, at 5 p.m. on the steps of the Tweed Building, which is located at 52 Chambers Street in Lower Manhattan. Please come out and support this. And I know we didn't say it, but I know masks, we definitely push for it. We want masks, people be social distancing, all that. We about safety, especially with a slight uptick in New York City. With the COVID-19, which is another question. How are we talking about opening these schools next week? And we got a slight uptick in New York City. We need to put these small little fires out before we get a big forest fire here. So Dr. Shango Blake, this will not be your last time. You know that, my brother. You've had some great representatives that came on from the B. Let me get that correct. I want to make sure that I say that right. Black Influencers United, BEU. BU. I love that, my brother. He is the president. All right, brother. Dr. Shango Blake, good to see you, my brother. Okay?
It's great to see you again.
All right, my brother. Take care. Peace, man.
Fatim,
yes, sir.
Can I ask Pam 2 questions?
Yeah. Yes,
Pam,
sir.
You still there, Pam?
I'm here. I'm here.
Right. I got 2 questions.
Yes, sir.
One, tell us your analysis of the federal investigation that's still going on